I got my first trophy when I was 28 months old and have been riding horses ever since. We lived in Texas for a while, California. I ran barrels in both of those states. We moved to Arkansas and I ran barrels for another 30 years. And then I got into cutting, working cow horse, versatility, some other disciplines, and it just kind of grew from those areas. I retired from higher ed, post-secondary education, and decided that I would use my expertise and talents in the horse training world. So that's pretty much how I started. When I work with a horse, whatever the discipline is, whether it is barrels or reining or cow work, I set some goals for that particular horse for that week, not necessarily that day, but for that week. Such as in barrel racing, I have a particular pattern that I want my horses to follow. So we may walk the pattern a dozen times. I want them thinking about where it is that I want them to, what we call set. It actually is making a pocket around a barrel. And then we'll move to a trot, and then we'll move to a canter. And then in a barrel horse world, you have to actually season that horse, meaning you have to haul them, take them to different arenas, different dirt, different things going on outside the arena, etc. They must learn to run in, not just turn the barrels in a specific qualified manner. So there's a lot to it. Most people think running a barrel horse is just pretty simple. And it can be, but there is some science to it, and I try to use that science no matter the discipline that I'm working in. There are some days that I don't think I'm a very good trainer at all, much less a rider. But what I've learned is patience. And if you aren't patient with an animal, a horse, dog, cat, doesn't really matter what it is that you're working with, you probably aren't going to get much accomplished. And you have to understand that their mindset is only at a certain level of human understanding. Perhaps a 8-year-old child, and that would be at the highest level, or in my opinion, that would be the highest level that a horse could achieve. So it is repetition, and to be repetitive, you've got to be patient over and over and over, and doing it exactly the same when you do it over and over and over. Somebody told me one time that perfect practice makes perfect, not just practice makes perfect. It has to be perfect practice. So I think that that is right, and that's kind of my philosophy with the horses. Ride them again and again and again, and do the same thing every single day, soft and quietly, and give them time to grow into what it is you're asking. Oh. Oh. If I had all my choices of the discipline that I would prefer to ride in, it actually is working cow horse. It's a 3-part event in that there are 3 parts that you have to do to please a judge. It takes a better horse, takes a more trained horse, typically takes a better rider. To me, it's the elite of what you do. Cutting horse people will say that their discipline is the elite, and it is somewhat, but in working cow horse you cut, you rein, and you do fence work. So I prefer that. In working cow horse, the 3 parts are a reining portion, which is a pattern that a judge decides upon. There are actually 12 patterns through the National Rein Cow Horse Association, and he chooses one of those 12 patterns for you to compete in. What the reining portion does is show to the judge how well you can control your horse in particular maneuvers, including stops, spins, rowbacks, circling, changing leads, things of that nature. Then there is a second part of the working cow horse called the herd work. And you must take one cow and show how well your horse can hold that cow against a wall or a stationary object, so to speak. And then the third part is called the fence work. And you have to run your horse down a fence line, turn it at a halfway point or just past a halfway point, turn it 2 directions, bring it to the center of the arena, and then circle the cow 2 times, once left, once right, in any order that you choose. So it takes a very strong horse, a very trained horse, to do all of these events. You have a time limit of 6.5 minutes to do all those things. and then you receive a score in each particular area. My success has to do with the horse. If the horse wasn't good, it really wouldn't matter, what good jockey you had on him if the horse couldn't do the thing. So I've had successes in those areas. I've actually won 4 world championships. The first one was at the World Foundation Quarter Horse Association World Show. We won the cutting, we won the working cow horse, and we won the trail class, and placed in 4 other events at that particular show, and that was my first World Show trophy. After that, I won the Palomino World in the working cow horse, and after that, I won the AQHA World Show in team pinning, and then the next year I went back and rode in the sorting and won that at the AQHA World Show. So all in all, I've won 4 world championships, all on the same horse. In the working cow horse, there are specific rules that you must follow. That's part of the National Reined Cow Horse Association rules and guidelines. It has to do with dress, such as the way I'm dressed today. You must wear chaps or chinks, you must wear a hat, long sleeve western shirt, boots. Your tack must be of a certain nature, such as this bridle that I have in my hand. This is a working cow horse bit. It has a copper roller here in the middle, and it's something that the horse can play with on his tongue. This is a required piece of equipment in working cow horse. This particular strap that goes behind his chin is also required. It cannot be a chain, must be flat leather such as this. This is called a slobber strap, and it kind of keeps these shanks of the bit together, also required. The reins that are here are required reins. They can come in different styles, but they must be what's called a romail. A romail has a big knot on the end. It has a whip attached to it, not that you can use it, but it's just part of it. And your hand must be at least, I believe it is 6 inches from the button on the romail where you ride. So there are some specifics to all these disciplines that you have to learn all those things as well in order to be competitive. In my opinion, your better trainers have a lot of different tack, a lot of different training bridles, different training equipment. And if they don't, if they're only using one bridle, one bit, one particular piece of equipment for every single horse that they ride, probably your horse is not going to ride the best. It's kind of like having different tools as an accountant or as a school teacher or something of that nature. You need lots of different bits depending on the stage and the level that your horse is in, the one that you are training. So these are the ones that I will use today on these horses that I have here today. So I wanted to make note of that it takes a while to actually establish all this equipment, put it together, compile it, and then to actually know which one to use on which horse at which time. So there is some expertise that comes in, the better that you get as a trainer, the better that you'll do at tack or accoutrements. There are days that if I haven't ridden in a few days, perhaps weather or been too busy doing other things, I can get a little cranky. And what that means is I just need to ride. I need to ride. It does settle me down, and there are particular horses that I want to ride on those kind of days, ones that I don't have to train, ones I can just sit on and enjoy the ride. That first World Championship that I won at the World Foundation Association, I really didn't even know that I won. I was very concentrated on my horse and getting a good job done. That was my goal, getting a good job done. Not necessarily beating someone else or going for a particular score, and that's still not in my mindset. I'm not good at that. I'm good at making sure that we do what we're supposed to do. And I truly believe that if I do my end, God decides who wins. That's just the way that I view things.
Hi, I'm Steve Jones. I want to talk to you today about one of my pet peeves, which is poor saddle fit. And one of the main reasons for poor saddle fit is poor pad selection. I like to try to use a pad as thin as possible and still be comfortable for my horse and provide support. Here we have an example of a pad that looks good, looks like it fits the horse, but it doesn't fit the saddle. We've now changed pads. It's the same type pad. Both of the pads that we showed in the previous shot and this one are double weave Navajos. It's been doubled. The difference is the pad that we had before was a 6-pound pad. This is an 8-pound pad, which makes it a little thicker, a little tighter weave. And with that, we've got a lot more daylight between the forks of our saddle and the top of his withers. And this pad, in my opinion, will work fine on this horse.
We're all held together with Storyteller's thread.
I'm Rodger King. In Storyteller's Thread, we're going to meet some of the coolest people who play some of the hottest music, just like this right here. Well, maybe a little hotter than that. I have a friend, David E. Young, who can saw one of these things pretty good. Let's head down to Nashville, Arkansas, that is.
I became interested in music when I was just a small child, and I can remember my brother and I were playing out in the middle of Highway 70 one day. It was a gravel road, and there was probably 3 cars a day came up and down that road. And we heard the sound, and I was probably 5 years old, and I'd never heard live music. And so we, like the Pied Piper, we started following that sound, and we went down to a neighbor's house, and this fella and his wife were sitting on the front porch playing the guitars and singing. That's the first live music I ever heard. And I guess I got hooked on it then. And I can remember using a broom for a guitar, you know, when I was a kid, pretending it was a guitar. And then as time went on, there's musicians in my family, back down on my dad's side, and fiddlers and whatever. And my dad loved the fiddle. And he could play a little bit, but he had an injury on his hand, and he wasn't much of a fiddler, but he loved it. And his dad played, and his dad played, and so it was just a big thing. He talked about it a lot. My dad was kind of a shy fellow, but he talked about it a lot, and I was interested. My mother sang continuously, and that's where I got my singing interest, I guess, from my mother. Well, I grew up mostly here in Howard County, Arkansas. When I first became interested in writing, my wife and I took a trip to Nashville, Tennessee, and it was the 4th annual big-time fanfare. I think they call it something else now, but this was back in the 70s, late 70s. And oh, we had a great time. We got to see all those people that I'd heard on the radio and all through the years. And so when we came back home, my wife, Patsy, made a statement to me one day. She said, "Well, David, you could write." I said, "Do you really think I could?" And she said, "Well, sure you could." So I started trying, and sure enough, I started turning out some little old songs. And of course, you know, every time you write one, you think it's a masterpiece, but when you look back on them now, they're kind of pitiful. Wake up and smell the coffee, it's time to face the day. It's 2 hours shy of sunup, you're gonna sleep your life away. The bacon's in the skillet, the biscuits on the bake. So cowboy, roll your butt out, or you'll be... But it was encouraging enough that I kept trying, and I've written probably over 350 songs in the past, and I was like 33 years old when I started, and so I've written several since then, and of course they're all masterpieces. When you become interested in writing, it just almost takes you over, and if you're really interested in it, and you'll carry that paper in your pocket and your pencil always with you, and then you'll get around to taking a tape recorder with you, a pocket tape recorder. So if you have an idea, because they're fleeting, if you think of, man, that's a good idea, but if you don't put it down in some form right then, you'll forget it when you get, 100 yards down the road if you're traveling. And so that's, it just takes you over. And I've gotten up in the middle of the night and have a thought, and I'd get up and write it down, or I have got up in the middle of the night and written songs. And because I knew come morning, I couldn't even remember what the subject was about. And then you just listen to people. And of course, I'm not real sophisticated. I'm kind of country, and these old country sayings, I like them. And so on the long hard road behind me, I was listening to an interview with Ralph Emery, and I believe it was Willie Nelson. And they were talking about Johnny Cash and how all the troubles that he had with his demons, and how he would come out of it, and then sometimes he'd slip back. But at that time he was doing well, and Willie Nelson made a statement. John got a long road behind him. And I wrote that down, and I thought, man, what a great idea for a song, and it's a pretty good song.
I've got a long, hard road behind me. I hope I never travel it again. I've got a long, hard road behind me. I've got the scars that show just where I've been.
Well, actually, the process of writing a song, sometimes you'll get a little melody line in your head, and you pick a guitar up and you'll work with that, and then you'll work with trying to come up with lyrics to fit that melody line. Sometimes a big portion of the time with me is I get a hook line, and then I try to work it from there, and then you can either do a slow song or a up tempo, and depending on what you want to do. And I tend to try to use maybe too many chords, but that makes for a beautiful melody. So many of the old country songs, 3-chord songs, and they're treasures, they're classics, and I've sung them all my life. But I do like a beautiful melody, and you can get that with it seems like it takes more chords to do that. And by the way, I probably don't know what I'm talking about because I don't read music. I don't know one note of music, and so that's just me. In categories, I would think Roses and Love Songs would be my favorite love song that I ever attempted. I have a song, a swing song that I really like, and it's called "Teach Me How to Two-Step, One Step at a Time." And I don't know why George Strait's not making himself rich with that, but maybe someday. And then on the inspirational side, I wrote a song called "He Has the Power," which is kind of along the lines of how great thou art. And then I wrote a recitation called "A Talk with God." And then but probably the best thing I've ever written, I have a couple of CDs on songs for children. One's inspirational and one is educational. My wife is a very lucky woman. Actually,
I'll play that for her.
Actually, I'm very lucky to have Patsy. We've known one another since grade school, and we just celebrated our 47th wedding anniversary. We started dating over 50 years ago, and our families were connected way back in the 20s and so on, So Patsy's she's just a great person, and she's a school teacher, and she loves her work, and she does a good job because I have taught with her. We went to Alaska one year and taught, and just we were the only two teachers in the school, and that's when I learned what really a good teacher she is, and the students are really lucky to have her because she cares that they learn. My first car was a truck. I had a 41 Ford, and had a flatbed on it, and I gave $55 for it, so I'd have me a ride back and forth to work in the summer. I was working summers and going to college. In the song, I started off. I bought a 41 Ford for $55 in 1962. Patsy and I went to college that fall, and of course we'd have to stop over at Kirby. We had a little spot we'd back up off the road on a hill, and I'd get out and raise that hood and put a quart of oil in it. And then, because of no compression in the engine, after it gets hot, you'd have to wait until it cooled down before it would start. So we parked it on that hill so we could roll it off and then go on to Arkadelphia. And so anyhow, one weekend we were coming back through the woods over here on one of these old back roads. We'd been down to my mom and dad's, and we stopped over there on the bridge, get a little kiss before I got home, and it was getting on up toward midnight, and she had to be in at midnight. Her mother just said after 12 o'clock was the devil's hour, So it was dark as pitch, and so we held hands and we walked about 3 miles on in here, and we sneaked in this room right over here, and that's where her brother slept, to wake him up, to get him go back over and give me a pull. Well, her mother slept in this other room, and Dad, she heard us. She got up and said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, David's truck wouldn't start." She said, "Well, what was it doing? Stopped." That's what.
What was your answer?
We did well. I don't know. We stuttered around like Mel Tillis, I guess. But anyhow, that was a true story. That was a true story. Back when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, we used to go around to people's houses, and they would have what they call musicals. And by that meant that certain musicians would come and they would play at your house, and the neighbors would find out about it, and they would come in, and that's back when neighbors were neighbors, and that's where I got a lot of my early musical exposure. And I had a first cousin, and his name is Joe Todd. I've got 2 fiddles that belong to Joe. And but he and his mother and Aunt Nora, she was my great aunt. We went to their house one time to play music. Well, Joe was playing the fiddle, and I was rhythming on the guitar, and I had another and 2 rhythm on the guitar. And Aunt Nora was sitting over there, and she was old timey, and she had a black gum twig in her mouth. They call them a toothbrush. They'd keep it doing that. And the reason why she used black gum is because it has a sweet taste to it. And it'll fuzz up, and it won't just splinter off. And so she'd, every once in a while, she had her snuff glass. And she'd take the lid off of that glass, and Garrett or whatever the brand name was, and she'd stick that end of that toothbrush down in that and get snuff on it, and then she'd put it in her mouth and she'd move it around like that. That was just the way folks did back then, And well, anyhow, after a while, Joe got through playing in tune, and there was an old man there, and his name was Louis Atchley, and he played the fiddle. Well, I'd never heard him play the fiddle, and Joe, being courteous, says, "Louis, you want to play us a tune?" And, "Yeah, I believe I will." So he handed him his fiddle, and Louis started playing a tune, and he played it, and he played it, and he played it, And after a while, he got done, and Aunt Nora, she had that toothbrush in her mouth. She leaned over to my mama, I think was sitting next to her, and said, "It'd take a tape as big as a barrel head to record a tune that Lewis played." And you know, we had those little Webcore reel-to-reel recorders, you know, and the tapes were about, you know, 5 inches across. But Aunt Nora thought it would take one as big as a barrel head to record a tune that Lewis played, because he played so long. Several years ago, my son and daughter-in-law, for an anniversary present or something, I don't know, but they bought us a trip up to Mountain View, got us a room and all, and there was a cowboy poetry gathering, and we went up there and took that all in and heard the cowboy poets get up and recite their poems, and I rather enjoyed that. So came back home and I thought, I believe I'll try my hand at that. So I've written some poems, and it is different because you don't repeat, you know, don't have a chorus that you repeat, you know, like in a song you do, but in a poem, and I'd fail to call myself I would hesitate to call myself a poet. I'm like the old guy over at Benton, Arkansas. I'm a versifier. I just write verses. I don't even know what the poems that are so great, so many of them that I've tried to read, I didn't get a lick of sense out of them, you know. So mine is for entertainment. My favorite poem that I've written, Daddy's Dinner Bucket. It's funny what one recalls of childhood memories, a fishing trip, a baseball game, or the time you skinned your knees. One such thought just came to mind. Don't know what made me think of it. I remember how I used to love to open up my daddy's dinner bucket. There was always some little something there, like a half-eaten Twinkie cake. I swear to you to this day, that's the best thing I ever ate. And a sip of grapeette soda, the taste I've never duplicated. When I smell one now, it takes me back to when times were less complicated. I remember once when times were lean and we were barely getting by. I opened up his bucket. There was nothing left inside. He saw my disappointed look. He was disappointed too. And he set in to make things right, because that's what daddies do. I'm sorry, son, I was working hard and guess I just forgot. Before I knew what happened, I'd eat up every bite. Tomorrow is another day, and just as sure as I'm your daddy, there'll be something special in my bucket for you. It could be a peanut patty. Well, times have changed, but it's nice to know that little things still matter. In this fast food world we're living in, most of us are getting fatter. Kids today make their own memories. When they're old, they can draw from it. I hope they're half as good as the ones I've got on my daddy's dinner bucket.